I'm Kyle Buchanan from Vulture, and you guys are in for a treat today. We have two of the most exciting directors in Hollywood. They're the masterminds behind two of next year's most anticipated movies, if not the most anticipated. So let's not waste any time. Let's bring them out. Please welcome Black Panther director Ryan Coogler and A Wrinkle in Time director Ava DuVernay. So it's my understanding that we ripped you cruelly away from the editing suites today. I know that you guys are working very hard on your movies, which are about to come out, but you're just down the hall from one another? You're pretty close, is that right?
Yeah, like right across the hall.
Exact next door neighbors. Our doors face each other.
From here to them chairs right there.
Yeah.
So do you call each other into your rooms all the time to be like, look at this scene, this piece of marketing?
We see each other, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And now and then we'll pop up in each other's rooms. Usually I'm scavenging for, they have really good snacks over at Black Panther. So I'll go over for a certain cookie. Yesterday you were in our suite looking at fruit wraps.
Fruit snacks.
Fruit snacks, yeah. So it's really about food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How far back do the two of you go? Do you remember the first time you met and what your impression was of each other?
Just talking about this.
We were just talking about it like Friday. It was 20, we met in January of 2013. And I obviously I seen Ava's work, knew who she was. But our first time meeting was in January of 2013, and like it was a room kind of like this, like in a ticketing lobby at Sundance. I was there with my first feature film with Fruitville, and Ava was there in the lobby, and we saw each other, kind of recognized each other from photos, and she came up. Gave each other a big hug, and just kind of started talking. It's kind of been like that since.
And what was your first impression of Ryan?
I just remember seeing him and knowing of his work, and I remember in that moment, and he was just reminding me of it. It was a really long hug. It was as if we had known each other, because I think there's something about so few people like us doing what we do, that when you do find another person that's in that same space, a person of color, kind of telling a certain kind of story at that time in a certain space. It was like kindred spirits. And so, yeah, we met in that moment and never would have thought. I mean, you couldn't have told me then we would have been editing these size of movies or these kinds of movies on the Disney lot, doors 2 steps away from each other. It just wasn't even in my, it wasn't even anything I wanted at the time. And I can't say that it was anything that I wanted even when I said yes to Wrinkle in Time.
Well, then let's talk about what got you to yes in the first place, because I know that coming off of Selma, it seemed to me at least that you were being wooed everywhere. Netflix wanted you, Marvel was interested, Disney obviously got your big project. So how did they get you to yes?
It was just the story. It's not the size of the story for me. That's when I say I wouldn't have imagined that I'd ever be telling a story of this size, because I'm interested within Wrinkle in Time of the story of this girl. So she happens to fly on creatures, but if she wasn't flying on creatures, I would follow her wherever she was. I was just interested in the character of Meg and what she represented and what she goes through. So all the bells and whistles around it was nothing that I ever imagined for myself. Like I always say, and not enough people know her name, but I thought I was going to be the Black Lynn Shelton. And Lynn Shelton, like she makes these one beautiful independent filmmaker that makes films of a certain size and a certain feeling, and like she makes one every year. Like she churns them out. And I was like, if I can just do that. So I never imagined anything else. Not that what I'm doing now is better. It's just much different than I thought I would be.
So then mentally, what did you have to do to get yourself in the headspace of, okay, this is not a Lynn Shelton movie. This is a massive blockbuster that they're asking me to undertake.
Well, I'm trying to make a Lynn Shelton movie, just on a larger budget. You know what I mean? I mean, Lynn Shelton movies are movies with a lot of heart that really explore the interiority of their characters, most often women characters. And so I can't say that what I'm doing within Wrinkle is much different than what I did in Middle of Nowhere, I Will Follow, or what Lynn Shelton or a lot of other beautiful women directors do. That's why I always kind of take a little thing about first Black woman director to make a film of a certain size. And that's really a construct that's outside of what it really means to tell the story. You know what I mean? That's an industry kind of financial construct that doesn't represent any kind of huge achievement for me. It's just about being able to make another movie. That's the achievement.
Brian, let's talk about your path to Black Panther. Now, industry scuttlebutt would have it that Marvel went to you for this project and initially you were wary or you turned it down. Tell me about that process and what got you to the point where you were like, no, actually, you know what? I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to give it 110% of myself.
It wasn't ever a time when I turned anything down. You know, it was really it actually worked out in a way that I couldn't have imagined it. You know, I was in the comic books my whole life, but once I got into filmmaking, I realized I really like to tell stories and select projects that had that dealt with themes or questions that I was having personally, or questions that I was dealing with personally. You know, and Ava and I, you know, we talk a lot with film, but also we talk a lot of, like, you know, outside of film. And one of the big things we had been working on, we're in a foundation called Black Office Human Rights, and it deals with like issues of human rights violations that happen to folks here in the States, mass incarceration, you know, police violence, things of that nature. And it was something that I was really, you know, grappling with, like just subject matter wise, things that Black folks are going through in this country at the time. Right around the time I was finishing up Creed, and
I'm just waiting. Everybody say something.
and one of those things I found myself coming back to is, you know, what is colonization? You know, what does it mean to be African? These questions. And then right around that time, you know, Marvel reached out and you know, wanted to talk about the project, and we engaged, and I kind of shared that with them, and they were really open in exploring those things, you know, in this film, in this massive superhero film, and it ended up working out, you know, between us, you know, and I was really excited to do it. But there was never a time when I turned it down, you know. But it you know, when it came about, I happened to be really interested in the subject matter. I thought it would be an amazing opportunity.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest emotional connection the two of you have to your lead characters?
Ooh.
Well, I mean, the thing that I hear both of us saying is that, you know, it's less about the bells and whistles and the size of the projects that we're working on, and it's more about being able to talk about the things that we were interested in exploring as storytellers, and they happen to be in these big, splashy projects. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how I feel about it. I mean, the opportunity to, you know, explore some real Black girl magic on screen, like, I'm not mad at that, right? You know, to challenge the idea, which is I think something both of our films do, of who gets to be the hero, right? So in Wrinkle in Time, you know, literally this girl of color saves the universe, not just the world, multiple planets and galaxies, right? I mean, that's just such a radical idea, you know, as a woman of color, as anyone who's kind of outside of the industry construct of who is usually put forth as the hero in cinema. And so to deconstruct that, to unpack that, is really what attracted me to it. And you know, I see Black Panther as doing something really similar in terms of, you know, remixing those standard tropes. Yeah.
Emotional connection to the main character. I think it's interesting, right? Because, you know, I'm also buddies with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's writing the run. He's writing the run. You know, he's writing the run right now. And T'Challa is a very interesting character, and on the surface, I think he's kind of difficult to write. You know what I mean? He's kind of difficult to attack because he's so great in so many different ways. You know what I mean? Like he's extremely wealthy. He's extremely smart. He's culturally knowledgeable. He's a king. He's got this power. You know, he's a good guy. You know, so you know, usually, especially in comic books, I was always drawn into characters who you know, you kind of got into their story through their flaws. You know. Like Batman is kind of crazy, and he's harboring this you know, he's harboring this, he's reliving this terrible moment that's happened to him, and that's kind of how you kind of get in with Batman. But with T'Challa, you know, he's kind of got everything going for him, and in a way, when I first thought about it, I said, man, this is gonna be tough, you know, because I'm not sure I would like this dude, you know what I mean? Like from my own perspective, you know, because he's so different from what I'm used to, but through the process of making the film. You know, through the process of working with Chad and really, you know, trying to explore these themes and find ownership in it. Like I'm incredibly attached to this character now, and you know, in our film, you kind of find him at a time where, you know, where he's just lost the most important person in his life, who's his father, and he's inheriting this incredible responsibility, and he's inheriting it at a time when Wakanda is struggling off struggling over what their identity is going to be. In our film, the world doesn't really know about Wakanda. They kind of exist in secret. They kind of exist in the shadows. And he's coming in at a time where people have different ideas of what the country should do. So he's incredibly conflicted, and he's aware of this responsibility and trying to find it in himself. What to do. It's not much unlike what me and Ava are going through. with these films. You find yourself every day. People trusting you with this massive thing that has a lot of importance, but they watching. They hoping that you don't mess it up. You know what I mean? And you got smart people around you who are putting their opinions in, but at the same time, you got to remember, oh yeah, I'm smart too. You know what I'm saying? So when they giving these opinions, man, maybe if my opinion conflicts, might be good for me to speak up sometimes. Other times it might be better for me to listen. And the other thing that's really cool about him that ties into, what I'm so excited about Ava's film for is, he's surrounded by these incredible women. That's something that's consistent in the comic books, and that's something that's in our film as well, and that's something I find incredibly unique. And I'm so excited for people to see.
Well, I'm excited to talk about the sort of how you bring the intimacy to these large, gigantic spectacles, but I want to talk a little bit about the spectacle. One of the things I'm most excited about, and to judge from the cosplay, the Halloween costumes, is these incredible outfits that Ruth Carter has put together. Tell me about how the two of you conceived them.
I think that, working with Ruth, it's funny too, because Ava was mad at me for using Ruth. She was like, yo, you got Ruth now?
Ruth? Ruth worked with me on Selma,
Ruth
and I just
did Selma.
assumed she was going to be there for Wrinkle, and she was like, no.
Ruth's incredible, obviously, man, and she's she designed costumes for some of the movies that I was, like just seminal films, man. Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, Selma, and just how we got to work together with this was just we wanted to look, the big question for us, for everybody, man, for Marvel, for myself, for Ruth, for every department was what does it mean to be African? You know what I mean? What does that mean? What does that concept mean? And we look to the continent, for clothes, and we look to the continent for colors and patterns. And we had the comic books there, and Marvel has an incredible department called Visual Development, where it's just a bunch of artists that kind of ran by an artist named Ryan Minerding, but their job is to design superhero costumes, and to make sure that the costumes work and are functional but look cool and are respectful of the comics. So it was a collaboration between all of us, to find these to find a storytelling through what these characters put on, and when they change costume, and what that's saying about their journey in the film. But we really look to the continent. We look to the continent for what the Dora Milaje will wear, for Black Panther suit. We looked at Afrofuturist works. For looking at how technology would inform. What they wear, and what we found in a lot of in African culture is that clothing has like multiple functions. A shirt is not just a shirt. It tells a story. It's got a design that speaks on what tribe you're from, what your family's done, what your rank is in your tribe, and it also might serve as a form of protection. Whether it's from the weather, whether it's in battle. So we kind of tried to build off of that. That was and Ruth was incredible.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask about one of my favorite yeah, go ahead, yeah. One of my favorite outfits from the trailer is actually one of the most dressed down ones. It's Michael B. Jordan in the glasses with the shielding coat. I saw everybody picking that one out on Twitter.
Oh, man. What you want to talk about, the coat or?
I mean, the entire thing. I assume he's sort of incognito in that scene.
Incognito. It's a difference.
Yeah.
Did he look like maybe Ryan Coogler looked in college?
Nah, I couldn't afford that coat in college, man. College, I had on a sweatshirt that like my football coach gave me or something. But no, I mean it was great, man. Like we really wanted to explore, like what it means to be African and from everywhere. And Mike's character Eric Killmonger is from the States. So you kind of get a vibe for a little bit of the diaspora in our culture here, as African Americans. So everything that he would wear, in different scenes, it's something that we talked about heavy, and we tried to pull from cool fashion. Mike was really interested in that scene to kind of look at some of the stuff that street fashion culture is bringing to it. You got Jerry Lorenzo with Fear of God, and Virgil Abloh. We looked at a lot of that stuff, and looked at how denim is making this big return. So that was kind of what went into picking what he would wear for that scene.
What about working in the Marvel sandbox? I mean, you are establishing a world that we haven't seen on screen before, but in a way you're still working in a universe that we've seen multiple movies from, inheriting characters that were introduced in other films. How do you find sort of the happy medium where it can be Marvel, but it can also really be Ryan Coogler?
I mean, I think that was what the studio was interested in. When we sat down, they're in a place where they've made a lot of these films, and they're really interested in ways to make them different. And I think what you see what they did with Taika with Ragnarok, and work that they've done with James Gunn. They really want the filmmakers to bring themselves to the table. And like to make like a good analogy. I don't know how many of y'all in the fashion, but like a big thing in fashion right now is collaborations. Like you'll see Nike, who's been making Air Forces for 20, 30 years, say, yo, we want to make an Air Force, but maybe we want to make it different. And they'll get with a designer and say, let's make your version of this Air Force, and you get a completely different shoe. People go crazy for it because it feels familiar, but at the same time, it's bringing something different to it. And I think that that's a way that these films can be effective, and Marvel was extremely open to that.
And I would think maybe you could find inspiration from other Marvel movies, because I know that both of you have worked with Tessa Thompson. When you see her as Valkyrie in Thor Ragnarok, what is that like for you?
I'm just a babbling idiot. I've watched that trailer. First of all, it's one of the best trailers of the year, that trailer. Mm-hmm. But I watched that and her in that film. I mean, I was pretty much stalking her on Twitter, on text, OMG, did you see when you did this? She's like, yeah, I did it. I was like, but when you wore this? She's like, yeah, I remember. I mean, to see a friend so bold and ballsy in a character, in a representation that I've not really seen a black woman inhabit before in that space where it's kind of psychedelic fantasy, and she just owned it. It was very moving because we know her. Because I know her, yeah.
Well, speaking of black women
inhabiting
space.
She's kind of like that in real life, though.
Yeah, Tessa kind of like that in real life.
In real life, so yeah.
Well, why don't we cue up the Wrinkle in Time trailer and deep dive into this? So there are so many different worlds, different planets. Tell me about conceiving the visual look for these places, and then also making these wildly different planets sort of exist in the same movie together.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to see that because it'll probably be the last time we watch it because the new trailer drops tonight during the American Musical Awards. So I'm excited about that, where we show more of the movie. But no, I mean, that was one of the things that Disney really drew me in with it when they called me in and they asked to talk with me about the project. It was really Tendo Nagenda. I think it's really important to name names to the people who've been supportive of you because it is not a normal thing to have studio executives kind of foregrounding, the work and vision of women of color, people of color in general in this space. So there's a brother over there named Tendo Nagenda, who's like the executive VP of production, and he, in the meeting, he says, he's telling about the story, and I hadn't read Wrinkle in Time as a child. And so he's telling me about the story, and he's telling me about Meg, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I really am going to read this. And then he says, and imagine the worlds you can build. I remember him saying that distinctly. Imagine the worlds you can build, Ava. And I said, the worlds I can build? And he's like, yeah, she hops planets. And I was like, she hops planets? He's like, yeah. It's all about her planet hopping from planet to planet. And I was like, well, what planet? Like Mars and stuff? Like what? She's like, no, planets no one's ever seen or heard of. And I was like, what? So, I mean, that really is what got me. Yes, the story of Meg, but then the idea of being able to design and create spaces and places that, were unmapped. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that process was extraordinary. A visual development phase where you just get to play, for a couple of months and play with ideas, and you're working with a team of artists and you're throwing out crazy things, and the next day they come back and we're showing sketches and palettes and wisps of fabric and looking at other films and trying to kind of figure out how to make something that we haven't seen before, but also something that feels familiar and intimate. So yeah, that process was extraordinary, and I just attacked it planet by planet. I'm excited to kind of share a vision of what a sci-fi vision through the lens of a Black woman, because so often when watching sci-fi films, it's through one specific lens, right? A white male lens predominantly for decades and decades and decades. And so, not that mine will be radically different, but there might be a softness to it or an edge to it or a color change to it that we've not seen, or maybe we have seen but skewed. The bottom line is we don't know until we see it, so why don't we just see it? On March 9th, when everybody goes in.
Well, let's talk about one of those
I gotta
planets.
hustle for my tickets,
No?
Ryan. I gotta
Although I think you're preaching to the choir in this room. Let's drill down on one of those planets. Pick a planet from me that's in this movie. Tell me about sort of what was in that play phase. What were you putting on the vision board? What were your inspirations for it, and then how it evolved?
Yeah, gosh. Well, there's a planet called Camazotz at the end of the film, which is supposed to be controlled by an evil mind. And in the book, basically this planet shifts. It's a planet of many faces. So every few minutes, the environment's changing. So that was cool to try to figure out all of the different changes and what those can look like and feel like, and how you get from the suburbs to the next place, and how the world switches right before the character's eyes. So that was fantastic to play with. But one of the things in the book, in the final kind of showdown scene, the main character, Meg, confronts the monster, the it. And widely known in the book, she walks into a room and there's just a brain hanging in the corner. And I was like, that's nasty. How am I gonna shoot that? A brain hanging in the corner? I was like, maybe I'll make it really big. And just super drippy. And I was like, oh, that's nasty. I couldn't wrap my mind around the beauty of what that would be. So I won't say what we did, but we end up doing something completely different, taking the idea of a brain and remixing it and kind of stretching it and kind of creating something different from the book, but it is the book. And so that was the goal. It's like we're working with source material. It's working with a much-loved comic book, working with a much-loved novel. And you want fans of the book to feel like you caught the spirit of it, but I didn't feel tethered and kind of shackled by having to make everything exactly how it was in the book. I mean, there's no Black and Southeast Asian misses in the book, right? In the book, the girl is not, biracial. In the book, the little boy is not like a little Filipino-American little brother, right? So it's just like we took liberties to be true to the spirit, but we freed ourselves and freed our imagination to bring these fairy tales and these fantasies into the current time, which is one that should be much more inclusive.
Thank you. Ryan, what did you feel like you had to sort of update about the source material in Black Panther?
I think the biggest thing was, and it's different, right? Like what Ava's talking about is because A Wrinkle in Time was it's a book, and with books, you can kind of keep reading, and people aren't saying like, let me rewrite this book. You know what I mean? You can just go back to the book and go. With comics, it's a little different because they're ongoing. Like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby invented this character in the 60s. But you've had Christopher Priest and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Reginald Hudlin kind of come in and add and keep adding on, and the character gets updated, in the pages. So for us, it wasn't about finding a way to modernize anything per se. The biggest challenge for me was more looking at how Wakanda would fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And people are familiar with this world, and what they did with that world is that Tony Stark kind of exists in a world that's similar to our own. Like if you watch Avengers, when the monsters fall out of the sky, it looks like our New York. You know what I mean? People interact with each other the same way that we do. So I was trying to find out how Wakanda could exist in this world, and these characters don't really know anything about it. And in the comic books, Wakanda is known. Like everybody knows that there's this country in Africa they have this vibranium, they're really wealthy, you know, you can't go in there, they're very strong, and they kind of keep to themselves, but people know about that. You know, in the MCU, it seems like people didn't really know. So this idea of Wakanda in hiding, you know what I mean? This idea of Wakanda, you know, operating with the front, you know, and the front that we kind of used was you know, what if people thought Wakanda was like what if people thought Wakanda was like Burkina Faso, or it was like a small country in the Congo that nobody had ever really heard of, thought it was poor and small and didn't have a lot going on. What if they had convinced people of that, you know, so that they could go on unbothered, you know, and with that concept, you know, was kind of what gave birth to the film and the dynamics that we have, you know, that we have in it. And that was, you know, something that was challenging. And Ava talked about naming names. Like, I got to talk about, you know, Nate Moore, you know, who's a black man who works at Marvel, producer, worked on Winter Soldier and Civil War. When I first met him, I didn't know it was any black executives at Marvel. You know what I'm saying? So I came to the meeting. He actually called me on the phone, and I was talking to him on the phone. I'm like, man, I think this dude's black. You know what I'm saying? You know how it is. Y'all know how it is on the phone, man. You know, and I kind of go into the restaurant at the meeting, and I'm like, oh, he is. You know, we sit down. I was like, that's what's up. You know, we sit down and we start, you know, we start vibing. But Nate was, incredibly supportive and incredibly conscious of what, you know, what it would mean if Wakanda existed. You know what I mean? And you know, not just what it would mean to the world, what it would mean for us. You know, so I think that was a big challenge that we had, and you know, trying to sort out a way that it would be believable that this nation, you know, could hide.
I'm curious for both of you, what was the thing that you were presented with, whether it was a costume, a piece of concept art, or a massive set, that maybe produced your biggest geek out moment on your own production?
I don't know. I think probably the costumes and the hair when they came together. I mean, when Oprah Winfrey walks out in a platinum blonde, kind of star-shaped wig, and you'd had it sketched, but you weren't sure, A, would she put it on, B, would it look good? And the clothes, and like, you know, all of her clothes is kind of constructed like different kinds of armor. And she walks out and she looks incredible, and like all the key grips and the gaffers, you know, all my guys and girls, just break out in applause when the actors come on stage. Reese Witherspoon in a red, you know, fishtail. Kim Kimble, the incredible head of our hair department, just innovating these things. And so it's one thing to put those things on paper, and then another thing to work with actresses and kind of try to convince them to look that way. And these women were incredibly game for it. But then when they walk out, just Mindy, just so gorgeous in all the frames. So that just inspired all of us. You know, the worlds are one thing to make, but when you put this living art, these clothes and this hair on people, and it becomes a part of them, and the characters come alive, there's nothing better than that to me.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, what about you? What was the thing that you were like, holy shit, yes?
Man, it's tough, Carl. It would happen every day, man. It still happens in post, you know. But I would say, I mean, look, man, I would have to actively play mind tricks with myself that I didn't see what I was looking at, so that I wouldn't like break down, you know, like so I wouldn't emotionally break down and lose time, you know, because you fighting. Ava knows, man, you fighting the clock constantly on these things. But I think I would say the first time, and it's a trip, right? Because these are two actors that I inherited. You know what I mean? It was Chadwick and an actor named John Connie, who's a massive talent and kind of like a titan of acting in South Africa. But he plays T'Chaka. He plays Chadwick's T'Challa's father in the film. And he was casted by the Russo brothers in Civil War. But I'm giving a little bit of a spoiler, but not so much a spoiler. But they have a scene together in our film, and he showed up to rehearse. You know, it was like the day before they were supposed to shoot, and he kind of showed, he got this, and he's this African man in his 70s, He just got a wealth of knowledge, you know what I mean? And he shows up and he's talking to me and telling me, stories about what he was, some things he was dealing with back on the continent. And he's wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He dressed in a backwards cap. He dressed like us. And Chad shows up and we on this stage that we gonna shoot on, man, in the middle of a warehouse. And he's like, man, so Chad shows up. He's like, hey, can we start? And they start rehearsing, and both of them being incredible actors that they are, they both just snap into it. And it's just me and them. It's just me, them, and my cell phone. You know what I mean? And they start speaking in Xhosa, which is a dialect in South Africa. That Chad learned and that John speaks naturally. And something about just realizing that we're gonna have this film where a father and a son talk to each other in this native African language, talking about the things that we were talking about. But in a superhero movie, it kind of hit me. It kind of hit me pretty hard for a second. It was emotionally moving, and it was, and whenever it happens, I know Ava the same way. She's smiling, she up here, but she a machine, man. Like I seen her in action. When you get those moments, you got to remind yourself, okay, I can't fall to pieces right here. You know what I'm saying? It's so much work left to be done. So you give yourself a couple seconds. You know what I'm saying? And then you get right back to it. But yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one right there, I think.
Talk about your evolution as visual artists, whether it was before you started making movies or even during them. What had to happen? How did you assert your ability to tell stories visually to get you to this point?
Give me the question one more time, Kyle.
Your evolution as a visual artist. I mean, both of you have made movies before, but even before that, whether it's your personal style, the way that you constructed your bedroom, what were the ways in which you could express yourself that led to you putting together these amazing frames?
That's a trip, man. Because growing up, I was an athlete, man. Like I went to school, played sports, and didn't think of myself as an artist. But I would draw stuff, like looking back on it, I would draw. I was always trying to make some money, so I would draw I would get fabric pens and draw on my homies' jeans. I couldn't even draw that good, but I convinced them that I could. You know what I'm saying? And charging $15 here, $20 there. I draw on a canvas hat or something when we was rocking those. And we would kind of make sneakers, make tennis shoes, watch Power Rangers, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh man, if we had this Power Ranger, he'll look like this. But it was something me and all my buddies did. And then when I discovered filmmaking, it was like something got reawakened in me again. And I realized, oh yeah, I do have an affinity for how things line up, for how they feel, for how they look. But at the same time, you find yourself, hooking up with other great visual artists, you know what I mean, to lean in, like, folks like Rachel Morrison, and I know Ava works with Bradford Young on a lot of her films, and you hook up with other folks who see it, who appreciate it like you, but see it in a different way, and that's the kind of the beauty of filmmaking, because if I was still drawing on clothes, I'd be trash, man. There's people who are a lot better than me there, but.
Ava, what about you?
I don't know. I didn't go to film school, and I didn't pick up a camera till I was 32. So that's intimidating, when you're in a Sundance environment with a lot of really talented people who did have the benefit of that kind of formal training. And so to really be able to trust my own eye and to be able to see value in the way that I was thinking of frames and thinking of moving the camera, while not in those early years having a full vocabulary and a full grasp of all the tools available to me, right? I just knew how I wanted it to look. So it was really important, and how I wanted it to feel. So it was really important that I surrounded myself with people who wouldn't judge me for not being able to tell you exactly what lens I wanted, but would really kind of understand the mood and vibe of what I wanted, and delved into that, embraced that, and gave me what I wanted. And so now, of course, I'm caught up. But I felt like kind of right about the time, maybe on Selma and some other things that I've been working on, Queen Sugar and the look of that I am kind of really being able to be really clear about my style, but the way that I want frames, this Disney movie comes along, and my responsibility is not to, yes, it's to put myself in it, but also I'm making a Disney movie. It's Disney's A Wrinkle in Time, right? And so it's not going to be the same frames that I make with Bradford, right? When we're just kind of like going forward and doing whatever we wanted on a free and independent set when no one's going to be, looking at the frames. I remember we were shooting Selma, and we were shooting a scene when Dr. King and his comrade are in jail, a dank, dark, southern, horrible jail cell, and they're having a conversation. And so we said, this will be dark. You only see small outlines of their bodies and different people in the cell, and you'll just see the light from the street light coming in way in the distance, so you'll just get an outline. We were like, yeah, that's dope. So we shot it, and I remember the next day, the producers and the financier was like, yeah, it's very dark. And I was like, yeah, because they're in a dark place. And they said, yeah, but, they're black and they're in a dark place. Like, too much dark. And it's in the film. It's in the film that way. But those are the kinds of things that you kind of have to fight for in a certain space. I didn't want that to be in this Disney film. This Disney film belongs in the Disney cinematic canon. That is one that's very bright and full of light. And so right about the time that I'm getting a good grasp on how I like things to be, I purposefully went the other way to lean into, speaking in a visual language that people expect when they go and see a Disney movie. Now I'm trying to make it a little doper, a little edgier, but not to go full, full Ava, Bradford, whatever.
100%.
But really honor what this is supposed to be. So, and that was a first for me because I've never made a film where I felt a responsibility for the look being outside of just my own preference. And so it was a lovely experiment, and I'm happy with the frames.
And while you were doing that, Bradford was shooting Star Wars.
Right,
so.
But on Star Wars, somehow he negotiated to still do whatever he wanted. Still do whatever he wanted in a big Star Wars movie. I'm excited to see it.
What would it have been like for you to see these movies at age 10?
Transformative, which is what my hope is for these. I mean, that's really, really the true reason why I did it. I have a niece who's 13 years old who I call her the real Meg. She is the real Meg. I put the top knot on Meg and the glasses, and the way that Meg dresses is exactly for my niece Molly. It's out like there's a picture of Molly, and I gave it to the costume designer and said, this is what she will wear. And I want her to see all that's possible for her. And not have to wait until she's 32 years old to figure it out, right? Like, she should be able to know that she can, walk through any door, and even if the door is not there, if you start walking towards it, it will appear for you. And so yeah, that's my goal, and not just black girls, all kinds of girls, and not just girls, but boys too, to be able to see the possibilities, to be able to understand that a hero doesn't have to be defined so narrowly. That's my hope for it.
Ryan, what about you? If you were 10, super into comics, and you saw this big budget Black Panther movie.
Oh, man. I couldn't, to be honest, I couldn't imagine it, man. When I was 10, I remember being fired up that they were making a Ninja Turtles movie, like when they was making a Power Rangers movie, I was like, yo, and making a Power, and I think y'all wouldn't know what to do, man. But that said, if somebody told me it was an Ava when I was 10 years old, I would have told you there'd never be a black president. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, the fact that I'm making this film for my 10-year-old self, like every day, and simultaneously for my 31-year-old self. You know what I mean? Like, Charles King, who we both know well, close with, incredible producer, incredible person. He came to Comic-Con where we showed a little bit of footage, and he brought his two sons, Noah and Julian. And Zen, my wife, how old you say Noah and Julian are? All right, yeah, probably I want to say like 10 and 8, something like that. You know what I'm saying? and he brought them out there, and he had them in Hall H, and coincidentally, after we played it, we went back in the lobby. They was the first two people that I saw, and they ran up to me and they said, "Hey, yo, Ryan, man, that was awesome." You know what I'm saying? And they both gave me a little, you know, in a hug, and I felt it there. I was like, yo, I mean, for them, their world is different from our world, man. And at 10 years old, I told you there'll never be a president like Obama, and I would have told you there'll never be a president like Trump. I told you it was crazy if both those, you know, and these kids are living with, you know, they living with that world right now, you know, and they living with a world where there's Avas who picked up a camera at 32 and made masterpieces, you know what I'm saying, and challenges cinema and is gonna have a long career ahead of her and makes TV on the side. I don't know how she does it, you know what I'm saying? I'm in the hallways like stressing all over one movie, and she like, yo, I just came back from Queen Sugar and I'm on my way to Netflix. I gotta go to this awards banquet. How's it going for you? And I'm like, I was here all day, and I still don't know what's up. You know what I'm saying? Like, and she's like, oh yeah, we'll figure it out, you know. But I mean, like, just you know, these kids, man, I think they're gonna save all of us. To be honest with you, man, like. You know, and we gotta do our parts to keep pushing things forward, man. But I think it would, I mean, to see a movie about somebody who looks like me, man, who's a king, you know what I'm saying, and knows their ancestry to the beginning, and knows and has access to all of that, and has an army of incredible folks around him who believe in him. I don't know what that would have done for me when I was 10 years old, man. I don't know.
I want to get a few questions from the audience. We're not going to have time for very many, but first, 2 quick hits for both of you. Ava, yesterday Issa Rae was here. People asked her, she was asked a question from the audience about the rumored Rihanna Lupita caper movie. What can you tell us about that? Is that a potential go project? What's the status?
It's a possibility. It's a strong possibility, I'll say. We'll see. We'll see.
All right. And Ryan, has Marvel showed you anything from Infinity War? I would imagine, since Black Panther is in it, you might have seen some scenes.
It's a strong possibility? That's what you said. There you go.
Good answer. All right. Let's get a couple questions from the audience right here. Do we have a mic runner? Yeah, right behind you.
Hi, good morning. I'm curious to know, when you guys are in the development phases for your films, I'm right over here, was there a particular note that you got from the executives or a producer that you guys fought for, or like, no, I'm not taking the story in that direction?
No, not for me. It was an incredible collaboration. Our screenwriter, Jennifer Lee, who wrote Frozen, and I just got along fantastically, and she had already had a lovely script, and so we worked together to carve it and craft it into what we both wanted, and the studio was incredibly supportive, so really got lucky.
It was the same for me, honestly. It was, you know, it was a conversation. It was constant conversations. So it was never like a note that came in the mail that was, hey, we want to do this, and it was something that I was like, man, that's we were always talking. You know, we were kind of always together. You know, and like any collaboration, you'll have different point of views, but it was never a situation where that happened. You know, and what was great, you know, sitting down with Nate and Kevin and Lou and Victoria, was that, you know, we were in agreement on what the movie was going to be about before we really engaged. You know what I'm saying? Which was important. Which was important for me, and as a result, man, it's been a great collaboration.
Did Marvel say it all? Like, okay, we'd love it if you use this Andy Serkis character, and just FYI, the Winter Soldier is a popsicle in Wakanda right now. If you want to pop in there.
we had all the ideas on the table. You know, like we had all the, you know, and that's the cool. And like I said, that's the cool thing about collaboration. And collaborating with somebody who has this incredible stuff to pull from. You know, like, who wouldn't want Andy Serkis in a movie? You know what I mean? Like, who wouldn't want Chadwick in a movie? So I was like, man, you should put everything on the table that y'all got, man. Let's use all of this. You know what I'm saying? And let's figure out what else we can, you know, what else we can throw in to build off of it. you know.
Have more questions from the audience right here. You? Yeah. I think there's a mic coming your way.
Hi guys, my name is Dwayne. I run an organization called Pizza Color where we promote diversity and inclusion, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for everything you've been doing and paving the way for us. So my question is for both of you, is there any like dream project or actors or producers that you guys would want to work with in the future? Like any
Dream projects or actors?
Man, I'm working on my dream project right now, to be honest. I love to work with Ava in the future. But kind of already work with her all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, man, I think this is my dream project. Fortunately enough, you know, once I'm able to see it through, I'll figure out what's up after that. You know, got to meet Denzel. That was nice. You know what I'm saying? It was just a meeting. It wasn't like, hey, we're gonna do this thing together. It was just a meeting, but it was awesome.
Yeah. I want to, not in terms of actors, there's all kinds of actors, but I eventually want to, I don't know when it'll happen or if I'll be the one to do it, but I'd like to be a part of seeing the story of Assata Shakur come to the screen. Incredible freedom fighter, really controversial character, but a warrior sister that has a remarkable story. So, but we'll see if that ever happens. Thank you.
More questions right here?
Hi, music plays a huge part in your movies, in all the movies that you guys have created, and I won awards as well. How does music play a part in creating the trailer and creating the story for you?
Hey, did you get to pick the songs in the trailers? Or was that sort of a collaborative effort?
She made a song.
You made a
Yeah,
song?
I made a song. We haven't announced that song yet, though.
No, the song for the trailer.
Oh, that song?
Yeah,
Oh,
man,
yeah. I thought you were talking about that other song.
I don't know
You know
about
which
you talking
Break some
about.
Yeah, we
news.
don't know.
Break some news.
I thought you were about to say that song.
Nah. For the trailer.
Oh, yeah, I basically said to Disney, I'd asked Disney if they would consider some version of Sweet Dreams, and so, yeah, they put it in there. So, yeah, they've been...
We recorded it, the whole...
Yeah, we re-recorded it, new people, kind of like a remix on it, and so, yeah, it was fun. But yeah, music is such a huge, huge thing. You can have a scene, and, you know, a scene that... The same scene and put 3 different kinds of music on it. Source cues, which is like existing music that exists in the world. Score, which is something that's composed and it's mostly orchestral or something. Ambient music, and it'll completely change the meaning of the scene. So it's a huge, huge tool, and one that I really enjoy playing with.
Even when it comes to the philosophers in the film, because I know that Mindy Kaling's character quotes from a whole lot of places, and I believe Jay-Z is one of the people quoted, right?
She quotes a few hip-hop legends in it. Yes, in it. Yeah. So yeah, she only speaks through quotes, so she gets in a couple of modern-day poets. Yes.
And Ryan, what about you? I mean, both of the trailers for Black Panther have had amazing music.
Yeah,
I've Run the Jewels in the first trailer.
Yeah, that's all Disney marketing.
Yeah.
You know, they got a great team with Assad and Ibby and those guys, and they be, you know, pick some really brave stuff to put in the trailer for a film that's being distributed by Disney. You know what I mean? It shouts out to them for being open-minded and forward enough to put that stuff in there. I work with one of my closest friends. His name is Ludwig Göransson. Ludwig does, you know, he's done the music for pretty much everything I've made since I've been in film school. He works with, you know, does movie scores, but also as a music producer, works with Childish Gambino. And it's a trip for this because Ludwig is, you know, he's about my age, but you know, he grew up in Stockholm. You know, we had to make this. We making this film about, you know, about Africa. So, you know, almost like as soon as I figured out I was gonna do it, like he just flew to the continent, you know, and was like in Senegal, like set up a studio, got out there with an artist named Baba Ma, and just set up a studio and was living there, you know, and you know, recorded a bunch of stuff, you know, while I was writing, you know, and came back, you know, went back again and came back. So you know, our music is really interesting, and I think it'll be a cool experiment. You know, using a lot of music and a lot of concepts from the continent.
Well, that's all the time we have, but let's...
Wait. Can I just say one thing?
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know when next I'll be able to be on a stage with him, but I just want to thank you, Ryan, because I get to see, I won't get emotional, but, you know, we work on a Disney lot, And our doors are right across from each other. And I just want to thank you publicly, because to see you every day or a few times a week, and to be able to look at you and look in your eyes and know that we're doing the same thing and in the same space has been so nourishing and bolstering to me in good times and bad. So that's one. Not, it hasn't been a lot of bad times, but you make all the times good, and so I'm happy to be on this journey with you at this time. And I'm so excited about Black Panther. Congratulations. I really do. Thank
All right,
you.
let's hear it for these two, and thank you guys all for coming out.